Grayharbor's frozen sea cracked open after the storm, and beneath a collapsed dock, something was still breathing. Caleb Ward sent his German shepherd, Ranger, into the danger zone, and found a stray dog nearly swallowed by the black water. But when they pulled the little dog from the wreckage, a Bronze Star medal was tangled in his fur. A charity rushed in to claim the dog before anyone could ask why. Then Milo trembled at the sound of one man's voice, and Ranger stepped between them like he already knew the truth. Stay with this story, because what this dog carried out of the storm was not just a medal. It was proof of a betrayal. The rain had stopped before dawn. In Grayharbor Sound, that should have meant mercy. But mercy had a different face in the far north, where winter usually locked the sea beneath a white lid and made every fisherman, ferry worker, and old coastal widow trust the silence of ice. This rain had not been mercy. It had come warm in the night, too warm for January, needling through snowbanks, softening the frozen road shoulders, turning the harbor into a field of slush and broken mirrors. By morning, the clouds had torn open in ragged strips, and a pale brightness spilled over the coast. The world looked cleaner after the storm, almost washed wholly. Caleb Ward knew better. He stood beside the old ferry road with the wind pushing at his shoulders, watching black seams open across the half-frozen sound. The water had not sealed all the way. It moved beneath the ice in slow, muscular breaths, lifting and lowering the pale plates, as if something huge slept under them and had only begun to stir. He was 41, tall and compact, built like a man who had learned strength was not meant for display. A short, dark beard shadowed his square jaw. His cheekbones were sharp from cold, age, and the kind of memory that did not leave a man simply because he came home. His dark brown hair, cut in a military style but grown slightly longer than regulation, was damp beneath his hood. Under his rescue vest, he wore an old olive-gray tactical combat shirt, faded and softened by years of use, with fraying at the cuffs and shoulders. His earth-brown combat pants were worn at the knees, the cargo pockets sagging from rope, gloves, and tools. Old military work boots sank into the wet snow. An old watch sat on his wrist, its face scratched but faithful. Beside him stood Ranger. The German shepherd was 5 years old, yellow-black, powerful but not bulky, with upright ears, a strong muzzle, and amber-brown eyes that measured the world with quiet judgment. Rain clung to his coat in small silver beads. He did not whine. He did not pace. His body had gone still in the way Caleb trusted more than weather reports. Behind them, Deputy Maria Holt barked instructions at 2 adult volunteers loading blankets into a rescue truck. Maria was 38, sturdy, sharp-eyed, with dark hair tied low under a wet cap and a brown duty jacket zipped high against the cold. Grayharbor had exhausted her overnight. It showed in the set of her mouth, not in her hands. Her hands kept working. "The boathouse row is clear," she called. "We sweep the bait shop, then we're out. Our kennel road stays closed." Caleb did not look away from the water. "We need to check the edge. The ice shelf under that road cracked at 3. Maria stepped closer, boots crunching in the slush. "Nobody's out there." Ranger's ears flicked. Caleb looked down. The dog had turned away from the sound and toward the low line of ruined buildings crouched against the harbor, a bait shop with its sign half torn loose, a storage shed split open by wind, and beyond them, near the old cannery pier, the fenced property that had once belonged to Harbor Valor Foundation. The kennel had been marked empty on the county list. Empty was a word Caleb had learned not to trust. Ranger gave one low sound from deep in his chest. Maria heard it too. Her expression changed. "What's he got?" Ranger moved before Caleb answered. The German shepherd stepped off the road, nose low, paws pressing through the crust of wet snow. Caleb followed, and after a bitter mutter, Maria followed him. The shoreline reflected the strange morning light in every puddle and broken blade of ice. Beauty lay over the place, like fresh paint over rot. Ranger led them past a half-submerged pickup, past crab pots tangled in stormweed, past a section of dock that had folded in on itself. Then he stopped beside a mass of wreckage driven beneath the old boathouse. Planks, wire mesh, torn roofing tin, fishing rope, and shattered pilings jammed together above black water. At first, Caleb heard only the tide. Then Ranger barked once. Sharp, controlled, a command. Caleb dropped to one knee. He pressed a gloved hand against the boards. The wood trembled. Beneath it, unseen water slapped and sucked at the pilings. Maria caught his arm. Oh, don't. There's something alive. That pile's sitting over open water. I know. Caleb. The way she said his name held more than warning. It held all the people Grayharbor had already lost in stupid, quiet ways. A man stepping onto ice that looked thick, a woman crossing a flooded lot, a volunteer thinking one more minute would not matter. Caleb unclipped the rope from his vest and looped it around a rusted steel support. Hold the line. Maria swore, but she took it. Caleb lowered himself onto the wreckage. The old boards groaned under his weight. His breath fogged in front of him. He could smell diesel, seaweed, wet wood, and something sharper underneath. Bleach, maybe. Or animal disinfectant. Too clean. Too deliberate. Ranger flattened his body beside the gap, muzzle working over the air. Caleb slid one arm into the darkness. Something jerked away from him, and a thin growl answered, more fear than threat. Easy, Caleb whispered. Easy. Nobody's asking you to be brave. The growl broke into a wet whimper. The sound cut through Caleb more cleanly than any cry for help would have. A human voice carried words. This carried only need. He pulled off one glove with his teeth and reached deeper. Cold water soaked his sleeve to the elbow. Wire scraped the skin near his wrist. He waited, fingers open, letting whatever was trapped feel the heat of his hand before the force of it. Ranger made a soft rumbling sound. Not a bark. Something lower, almost tender, the sound he used with survivors who woke up terrified under collapsed beams or inside overturned cars. The animal inside the gap stopped thrashing. Caleb touched fur. Matted. Icy. Alive. The board beneath his chest cracked. Maria's grip tightened on the rope. Now, Caleb. He hooked his arm under the small body and pulled. The dog came out of the wreckage like a piece of the storm that had learned to breathe. Small, soaked, and trembling, with cream and brown fur twisted into muddy ropes. One ear was torn. One eye was swollen nearly shut. An old leather collar cut into the fur at its neck. Wire and ribbon were tangled there too, wrapped so deeply it seemed the sea itself had tried to knot the dog closed. The little dog coughed water over Caleb's sleeve. Then the dock gave way. Maria hauled on the rope as Caleb shoved backward with both boots. Ranger sprang clear. The section of boards where Caleb had been lying dropped into the black water with a hollow crash, vanished, then bobbed up broken in the tide. For several seconds all three of them stared at the hole. The sea breathed below it. Caleb sat in the slush, the small dog pressed under his jacket. His own pulse hammered against the animal's shaking body. Maria released the rope slowly. You have a gift for making paperwork personal. Caleb almost smiled. Almost. Put it in the report. The little dog shuddered harder, folding into himself as though still trying to hide inside the wreckage. Ranger stepped close but did not crowd him. The German shepherd lowered his head and sniffed the old collar. Then Ranger froze. And Caleb felt the shift before he understood it. The dog's nose moved once along the matted fur near the collar, then stopped at a dark lump tangled under the rope and ribbon. "What is it?" Maria asked. Caleb brushed mud away with his thumb. A star appeared. Not bright, not clean, a small bronze star, darkened green-black by salt and age, caught in a strip of rotted ribbon and broken clasp. The metal had no pride left in it, only weight. On the back, beneath corrosion and mud, Caleb could make out part of a name. T. Bell. Maria crouched beside him. "Is that military?" Caleb did not answer at first. He had seen medals polished under glass and buried in footlockers. He had seen men pretend not to care about them and widows hold them like last warm stones from a dead fire. A medal could be honor, grief, proof, punishment. Sometimes all at once, And the little dog whimpered when Caleb touched the star, not because he understood it. Caleb knew that immediately. Dogs did not worship symbols. They remembered pressure, smell, hands, cages, warmth, hunger. This animal was not guarding history. He was clinging to the only thing that had remained attached to him while the water tried to take everything else. Ranger sniffed the metal again. His shoulders tightened. Caleb looked at him. "You know that smell?" Ranger turned his head toward Kennel Road. A metallic bang sounded beyond the sheds. Once, then again, something loose in the wind, maybe, or something not loose enough. Before Caleb could stand, headlights swept across the slush behind them. A black SUV rolled down the blocked ferry road. Maria straightened. "That road's closed." The SUV stopped near the rescue truck, and the man who stepped out wore a long, dark, waterproof coat that looked too clean for the morning. He was in his 50s, tall and well-kept, with silver at his temples, a controlled face, and the kind of practiced concern that made Caleb immediately distrust him. Maria's voice went flat. "Elias Crow." Caleb knew the name. Harbor Valor Foundation, charity galas, veteran programs, retired working dogs, photographs of flags, handshakes, and loyal animals under soft lighting. Elias Crow walked toward them with measured care. His dark gloves were spotless. His smile was gentle until his eyes landed on the dog in Caleb's arms. For one bare instant, the smile disappeared. Not surprise. Fear. Then it returned. "Deputy Holt," Elias said smoothly. "Mr. Ward, I'm relieved you found him." Caleb held the trembling dog closer. "You know this dog? We believe he belongs to our facility, and the storm caused confusion. Poor little thing must have slipped out." Elias extended his hands. "We'll take him from here. He needs proper care." The little dog collapsed inward at the sound of his voice. No bark, no bite, just a desperate shrinking, as if the bones inside him had remembered a room the rest of him wanted to forget. Ranger stepped between them. He did not growl. He did not bare his teeth. He simply stood there, a yellow-black wall in the wet morning light. Elias stopped. Maria looked from Ranger to Milo, then to the bronze star in Caleb's hand. "You told the county that Kennel was empty." Elias's smile thinned. The list was outdated. "Convenient," Caleb said. Elias turned his calm eyes on him. "This has been a difficult night for everyone. I'd hate to see confusion make it worse." There it was, a warning dressed as kindness. At the half-frozen sound cracked behind them, long and low beneath the pale sky. Caleb looked down at the little dog, then at the metal, dark against his palm. The storm had opened the water, but something else had opened too, and Elias Crow, for all his clean boots and careful words, had arrived too quickly to be innocent. The old net-mending warehouse had never been built to become a shelter. It smelled of damp rope, diesel, wet wool, and coffee burned down to bitterness on a portable stove. Its high windows were clouded with salt. Its concrete floor held the cold even after 3 industrial heaters had been rolled in and pointed toward the rows of folding chairs. Outside, Grayharbor Sound kept cracking softly under the pale morning as if the sea were grinding its teeth. Inside, no one had much room for poetry. Grown men sat with blankets over their shoulders. Fishermen with cracked hands cupped paper mugs of broth. An elderly harbor mechanic stared at the floor as if he were still hearing water rise inside his house. A woman in a postal jacket sorted medication bottles on a table while a volunteer wrote names on masking tape and stuck them to plastic bags. A Caleb Ward came in through the side door with Milo tucked beneath his jacket. Ranger entered close behind, his yellow-black coat still wet from the shoreline, paws leaving dark prints across the concrete. The German shepherd did not pull ahead. He stayed near Caleb's left side, where he always stayed when the world grew crowded and uncertain. Deputy Maria Holt pushed the door closed against the wind. "I'll call it in as an animal rescue and temporary hold." Caleb looked at her. "Temporary?" "For now." Her face had the hard patience of someone already arguing with people who had not yet picked up the phone. "Crow has paperwork. You have a soaked dog and a medal nobody can explain." Milo trembled harder at the murmur of voices. He was a small thing under all that mud and matted fur, cream and brown beneath the black smear of salt water. One ear hung torn at the edge, and his swollen eye barely opened. Every few breaths his thin body tightened, bracing for a blow that never came. Caleb had carried men twice his size through gun smoke and broken walls. This dog weighed almost nothing. That made him feel heavier. A woman stepped around a stack of emergency blankets with a canvas medical bag over one shoulder. Dr. Lena Voss did not look like the sort of veterinarian who wasted time softening the truth. She was 48, compact and steady, with chestnut brown hair tied low at the nape of her neck and gray-green eyes that seemed to take measurements before offering comfort. Her olive field jacket was streaked with mud at the cuffs. A pale gray turtleneck showed above the collar, clean only in the places her hands had not touched yet. "That him?" she asked. Caleb nodded. Lena cleared a folding table with one sweep of her forearm. "Towels, warm water, and not hot, and keep the shepherd close but not on top of him." Ranger sat 3 feet from the table as if he understood exactly. Caleb laid Milo down. The little dog tried to curl into himself. Lena's hand paused above him, not touching yet. "Easy," she said, not sweetly, but with the quiet authority of someone who had seen panic wear many bodies. "Nobody gets dragged anywhere on my table." Milo's good eye flicked toward her, then toward Caleb, then toward Ranger. Ranger lowered his head to the edge of the table and breathed once, slow and warm. Only then did Milo stop trying to disappear. Lena began cutting away the worst of the mud-caked fur around his neck and chest. She worked with small scissors, slow enough not to pull skin. The old leather collar beneath the fur had swollen from seawater and tightened as it dried. It had rubbed a raw groove into Milo's neck. Maria stood nearby with her notebook open, but she was not writing. Storm injury? Some of it. Lena tilted Milo gently and examined his front legs. Her expression changed by a fraction. Not all. Caleb heard that fraction. "What do you see?" Lena touched one of Milo's elbows. The skin there was thickened, hairless in a small patch. "Pressure calluses. Both sides. Not from one night under a dock." She lifted one paw, checked the nails, then the pads. "Uneven wear. He's been on hard surface for long periods. Concrete probably. Limited movement." Maria's jaw tightened. "Neglect?" Lena did not rush to the word. That made it worse. "Control," she said at last. "Confinement. Maybe neglect. Maybe worse. But this little dog didn't become this afraid because a storm scared him." The warehouse noise seemed to lower around them. Caleb knew people were still talking, heaters still humming, coffee still boiling badly in the corner. But for a moment all he heard was Milo's thin breathing and the snip of Lena's scissors. Caleb had thought on the shore that they had pulled one survivor from the wreckage. Now he understood they had pulled the wreckage out with him. Lena cut through a knot of fur near the collar. Something dropped. It struck the metal tray beside her instruments with a dull, final sound. Not a coin, not a tag. Everyone at the table looked down. The bronze star lay face up in the tray, dark with salt and age. Its bronze surface had gone green-black in the grooves. The ribbon was nearly gone, reduced to a rotted strip clinging to a corroded clasp. One tiny metal piece near the ribbon still held to it, bent and darkened, but shaped with intention. Caleb picked it up carefully, yet he had not wanted to touch it again. That surprised him. He had handled weapons, maps, dead radios, soaked letters from pockets. But the metal sat in his palm with the strange heaviness of things that had once mattered deeply to someone and then been mishandled by everyone else. Lena wiped the back with damp gauze. Letters surfaced beneath the salt. T. Bell. Maria leaned closer. "Could be Bellamy?" Caleb looked at her. She shook her head slightly. "Old Grayharbor name, not common anymore." Ranger rose from his sit. He did not bark. He came close to Caleb's hand, nose working over the metal, then over the rotten ribbon, then the broken leather collar on the table. His ears angled forward. Lena watched him. "He's caught a scent." "From where?" Maria asked. Caleb already knew where Ranger's head would turn, toward the side of the warehouse facing the old kennel road. The German shepherd stared at the wall as if he could see through timber, snow, and fog. The side door opened. Cold air swept in first. Elias Crow followed with it. He looked less like a man who had spent the morning in disaster and more like one who had arrived for an interview about disaster. His dark, waterproof coat hung clean from narrow shoulders. His silver-brown hair was combed back despite the wind. Thin black gloves covered his hands. Behind him came a younger man carrying a folder, silent and watchful, but Elias did not introduce him. "Deputy Holt," Elias said. "Dr. Voss, Mr. Ward." His eyes found Milo on the table. Milo's body went rigid. Lena noticed. Caleb noticed. Ranger moved half a step forward. Elias kept his hands visible and his voice soft. "I brought the Foundation records. The dog is one of ours." "One of yours?" Lena said. "A rescue animal under Harbor Valor's care. We had several temporary placements affected by the storm." Maria flipped open her notebook again. This time she wrote, "You told County Emergency Management the kennel was empty before landfall." Elias gave a small, sorrowful smile. "A clerical delay. Our relocation list was still being finalized. I'm sure you understand the pressure everyone was under." Caleb said nothing. Men like Elias liked silence when they owned it. They disliked it when someone else refused to fill it. Elias placed the folder on the table, but did not slide it close enough for Lena's wet hands to touch. "We appreciate the rescue, truly, but he needs to be returned to proper care." Milo began to shake so hard the tray rattled. Lena put one hand lightly over the dog's shoulders. Her gaze stayed on Elias. "He is hypothermic, dehydrated, injured, and showing signs of prolonged confinement. He is not being released today." The softness left Elias's face so quickly that Caleb might have missed it if he had not been watching. "Doctor," Elias said, "I respect your concern, but Harbor Valor has veterinary partners. Then they can request his records from me when I write them." Maria looked up from her notebook. Caleb saw the risk in her eyes. Lena had just given them a reason. Not a strong one forever, but strong enough for now. Elias understood it too. His gaze moved to the tray, to the metal. He did not reach for it. That restraint was the most revealing thing he had done. "I believe that also belongs to us," he said. Caleb closed his fingers around the bronze star. "To Harbor Valor?" "To the Bellamy collection under our stewardship." Maria's pen stopped. There it was, a name neither Caleb nor Lena had spoken aloud. "You know whose it is," Caleb said. Elias met his eyes. "We preserve veteran legacies. That is our work." Ranger gave a low breath through his nose. Not a growl, a judgment. The side door opened again before anyone could answer. This time the man who entered brought no polish with him, and he brought cold, old tobacco, damp wool, and the stubborn air of a man who would rather be anywhere else, but had come because something sacred might be getting mishandled. Art Keene was 69, broad in the shoulders, though age had pulled him slightly forward. His short silver hair lay flat under a dark knit cap. A worn brown canvas jacket hung over a blue-gray flannel shirt, and his boots looked older than some of the volunteers. His eyes, pale and hard, went first to Caleb, then to Ranger, then to the medal in Caleb's hand. "You called about a bronze star," Art said. Maria gave him a warning look. "Art, I heard what you said." He came closer. "I also heard Harbor Valor sent a lawyer before they sent a vet." Elias smiled thinly. "Mr. Keene, always a pleasure. Don't spend it all in one place." Art took the medal only after Caleb offered it. He did not grab. He cupped it in both hands, thumbs careful around the damaged ribbon. For the first time since Caleb had met him, the warehouse seemed to make room for silence. Art turned the medal over. He looked at the partial engraving, then at the small bent device near the ribbon. The old Marine's face changed, not dramatically. No gasp, No speech, just a tightening around the eyes, as if some door inside him had been opened from the wrong side. "Thomas Bellamy," he said. Maria's voice softened. "You're sure?" "No." Art swallowed once. "But I'm close enough to hate it." Elias stepped in quickly. "Thomas Bellamy's story has been central to Harbor Valor's mission for years. We have honored him extensively." Art looked at him. "Honored him?" The word came out like something scraped off a boot. He handed the medal back to Caleb. "Thomas didn't like crowds, didn't like speeches. He didn't like men using other men's dead friends to make themselves shine." Elias's smile held, but only barely. Lena bent over Milo again, using the distraction to examine the dog's ears. She lifted the torn one gently, then paused. "Caleb." He turned. Lena had parted the fur inside Milo's other ear. Beneath the irritation and grime was a faint blue mark, almost lost under the skin. Not a microchip scar. A number, tattooed. Maria moved closer. "Is that normal? For some working programs, breeders, labs, kennels?" Lena's voice stayed even, but her eyes did not. "Not for a stray." Milo lay trembling under her hand. The bronze star rested in Caleb's palm. Ranger stood between the table and Elias Crow, and the warehouse, full of storm survivors and wet blankets and bad coffee, seemed suddenly less like a shelter than a courtroom waiting for someone to confess. Caleb looked at the tattooed number, then at Elias. "If he's yours," Caleb said quietly. "Why did you leave him under a dock?" Elias did not answer. Not right away. That was enough. By noon, the road to Harbor Valor had become a gray vein running between snowmelt and sea. Caleb drove slowly, one hand steady on the wheel, the other resting near the evidence pouch in his jacket pocket. Inside it lay the bronze star, wrapped in gauze, still carrying salt, mud, and whatever else Ranger had recognized on the broken ribbon. Ranger sat in the rear of the rescue truck, quiet but awake, his yellow-black body braced against every rut in the road. He did not sleep after a find. Caleb knew that about him. The German shepherd held discoveries inside him like a command not yet released. Deputy Maria Holt followed in her cruiser with the lights off. Behind her, Dr. Lena Voss rode with a hard plastic medical kit and the expression of someone who had already decided she would dislike what they found. Charo. Art Keene came last in his old pickup, which looked as if it had survived 3 wars and several bad marriages. Milo had stayed behind at the warehouse shelter under medical watch. Lena had insisted. The little dog needed warmth, fluids, and stillness more than another trip into the cold. Caleb had agreed, though Ranger had looked back twice before leaving, as if leaving a survivor behind went against every rule written in his bones. The old kennel sat beyond the fish warehouses, close enough to the sound that storm spray had crusted white salt over the fence posts. Harbor Valor's sign still hung above the locked gate. "No hero forgotten." Beneath the words, a painted soldier knelt with one hand on the head of a noble-looking dog. The image had been designed to soften hearts and open wallets, and in the washed-out daylight, with the sea shifting black behind the fence, it looked less like compassion than a promise someone had abandoned halfway through saying it. Maria cut the lock with bolt cutters from her trunk. "County Emergency Authority," she said, as if the gate might object. Art snorted. "Say it louder, might scare the liars out." Lena shot him a look. "Try not to contaminate the scene with your personality." For one thin moment, the cold broke. Even Caleb felt the corner of his mouth move. Then Ranger stepped through the gate and stopped smiling for all of them. The yard inside was wrong. Not ruined the way storm damage usually ruined things. Caleb had seen storm ruin. Objects flung randomly, water lines on walls, broken glass, debris caught in places only violence could explain. Yet this had some of that, yes. Overturned bins, torn tarps, a warped kennel door banging faintly in the wind. But beneath the storm mess was order. Too much order. A row of stainless bowls had been stacked against the wall. Files had been pulled from a cabinet, but only certain drawers were empty. The front office smelled sharply of bleach, so strong it cut through the sour odor of wet dog bedding and old fish warehouses nearby. Lena paused in the doorway and closed her eyes, not from emotion, but from focus. "That is not cleanup." Maria looked at her. "Meaning?" "Bleach after flooding is normal. Bleach like this, in one office and 2 kennel rows, is someone trying to make a nose useless." Ranger lowered his head and moved forward. Caleb let him work. The German shepherd passed the front office without interest, then turned down the first kennel row. A chain link runs lined both sides, concrete floors sloping toward narrow drains. Most of the gates were open, some were not. A few had old nylon leads still clipped to the wire. No dogs, no barking, no claws tapping. Just wind moving through empty cages. Caleb had been in abandoned places before, empty barracks, evacuated houses, hospitals after shelling. There was always a kind of sound left behind when living bodies were removed too quickly. Not a ghost sound, nothing mystical, just absence pressing against the walls. Ranger stopped at the 4th kennel. A metal bowl sat upside down near the drain. Caleb crouched and turned it over with a gloved finger. Inside, scratched into the rim, was a name. Bruno. The next kennel had another bowl. Sailor. Then another. Junebug. Art stood very still behind him. "Those names in the records?" Maria asked. Lena's face had tightened. "Some of them?" "Not all." Caleb looked at the bowls again. Not evidence, not yet, but each name made the emptiness heavier. A kennel without animals could be explained. A kennel with named bowls, closed gates, and bleach poured down drains felt less like evacuation and more like erasure. Ranger moved again. At the rear row, he lowered his body near a gate that had been scratched from the inside. Deep grooves ran down the lower panel. Caleb touched one. The marks were not fresh enough to have been made that morning, but not old enough to dismiss. Lena crouched beside him. Small dog, repeated attempts, pawing low, not high. "Milo?" Maria asked. "Maybe." Ranger pushed his muzzle toward the drain beneath the gate. The drain cover had been bent upward just enough to leave a narrow, dark gap. Caleb lay flat, ignoring the cold concrete soaking into his shirt sleeve, and shone his flashlight through. Behind the drain, a crawl space ran under the outer wall toward the storm channel beyond the fence. "Could he fit?" Maria asked. "Barely," Lena said, "if he was desperate." Caleb reached into the gap and pulled free a strip of swollen leather caught on a rusted screw. The edge was torn, the color dark from water and grime. He took the piece from his glove and held it beside the fragment of Milo's collar Lena had removed earlier. Same thickness, same cheap brass rivet. Same smell, judging by Ranger's sudden stillness. Art looked away first, not because he was uninterested, because some men had to turn from sorrow before they could keep working. "He ran through that," Art said, "with the metal caught on him?" "Through there," Caleb said, "then down to the dock." Lena glanced toward the Sound, in freezing rain, through storm surge, with one eye swollen shut. Maria said nothing, but her notebook stayed closed in her hand. A dog did not need to understand history to become the only witness left alive. They found the security camera 20 minutes later. It lay half buried in mud near the rear office, torn from its bracket by either wind or a hand in a hurry. The casing was cracked, but the memory card slot was intact beneath a flap of rubber that had not fully sealed. Lena held out a specimen bag. "Don't shake it. If the card's wet, we dry it slow. Maybe we get something, maybe not." Maria looked toward the office. "Why leave the camera?" "Because people forget small eyes when they're busy cleaning big lies," Art said. Caleb placed the camera in the bag. Ranger had not followed them into the office. He had moved to the back wall of the main kennel, where a storage door sat crooked in its frame. Caleb saw him there, nose pressed to the crack beneath it, tail rigid. The door was locked. Maria tried the handle, then stepped back. "Anyone want to guess whether this is also empty?" Art lifted a pry bar from a shelf. "I'm old, not patient." The door gave on the third pull. Inside was not a room so much as a closet deep enough to hide things that still had names. Old blankets, a broken heater, empty food bags folded flat, a few framed photographs stacked face down, and on one shelf sat a wooden display case with the velvet lining peeled away in one corner. Caleb did not touch it at first. Ranger sniffed the case and gave a low breath. Caleb opened the evidence pouch and brought the wrapped bronze star near, not close enough for contamination, only enough for Ranger to compare. The German shepherd's ears rose. Same scent. Not simply salt, not simply metal. Oil used to preserve old wood, damp velvet, human hands, bleach trying to bury all of it. This held the metal, Caleb said. Art came forward slowly. The old Marine removed his cap as if stepping into church, though the place smelled of rot and chemicals. I saw one like that, he said, years ago, at a fundraiser in the community hall. Crow had it under glass with a spotlight on it. Told everybody Thomas Bellamy left his honor to the dogs. His voice hardened around the last word, not because he mocked the animals, but because he hated the performance. What was Bellamy like? Caleb asked. Art looked at the empty case. Quiet, stubborn, had a limp when the weather turned, fixed things for people who never knew who fixed them. After his wife died, he fed old working dogs behind the VFW when their owners passed and nobody wanted the responsibility. He swallowed. Man like that doesn't leave a medal so some clean-coated fundraiser can point at it over shrimp trays. Before anyone could answer, tires crunched outside the gate. Maria turned sharply, one hand near her radio. But it was not Elias. An old blue sedan had stopped beyond the fence. A woman climbed out carefully, carrying a brown folder under her coat to keep it dry. She was in her early 60s, thin and straight-backed, with silver-brown hair pinned low and narrow glasses that made her pale eyes look sharper than they were large. She did not walk quickly, but every step had the stubborn precision of someone who had spent a lifetime filing things where powerful men hoped they would never be found. Mara Whitcomb, Art muttered. The woman reached the gate and looked at the Harbor Valor sign with open dislike. Maria met her halfway. Mrs. Whitcomb, this is an active emergency site. Good, Mara said. Then perhaps someone will finally document what I documented 6 years ago. She handed Maria the folder. Inside were copies, not originals. Mara was too careful for that. Property transfer notes, city maintenance requests, a complaint about inconsistent animal care invoices, and a printed email with half the text missing because someone had archived the thread during system migration. I worked records for Grayharbor 31 years, Mara said. I know what a clerical error looks like. Harbor Valor was not built on clerical errors. It was built on convenient disappearances. Caleb studied her. Mara's hands trembled slightly from cold, but her voice did not. This was not a woman looking for attention. This was a woman who had waited too long for someone to ask the right question and was furious at herself for still wanting to answer it. Maria's radio crackled. She stepped aside, listened, and her face shut down piece by piece. When the call ended, she looked at Caleb. Crow filed a formal complaint and says you interfered with Foundation property, removed a decorated veterans medal from their custody, and are obstructing disaster recovery. Art barked a humorless laugh. That man could put perfume on a dead fish and call it a civic contribution. Maria ignored him. Her eyes stayed on Caleb. My captain wants Milo and the medal transferred to Harbor Valor pending review. Lena said, Absolutely not. He's giving me 1 hour to explain why not. Wind rattled the empty kennel gates behind them. Caleb looked toward the row of cages, the named bowls, the claw marks, the bent drain, the wooden case without its metal, Mara's folder in Maria's hand, the drowned camera in its plastic bag. 1 hour was not much, but it was more than Milo had under the dock. Ranger moved past Caleb and returned to the storage closet. He sniffed the lower shelf, then pushed his muzzle against the back panel. Caleb crouched. There, behind the shelf, where bleach had not quite reached, was a dark smear on the wood. Old oil, damp velvet fibers, a trace of the same scent that clung to the metal. The bronze star had not merely passed through this place, it had lived here. Caleb rose slowly. He understood now why Elias had come so quickly to the shoreline, why the man's face had changed at the sight of Milo, why the metal mattered more than the dog he pretended to mourn. Harbor Valor was not afraid they had lost an animal. They were afraid the animal had escaped with proof. The back room of the VFW smelled like old coffee, damp wool, and men who had spent too many winters pretending grief was just another kind of weather. A generator rattled outside beneath a sheet of blue tarp. Its cord ran through a cracked window and fed power to one laptop, one desk lamp, and a small space heater that glowed orange without convincing the room it was warm. Caleb stood behind Art Keene's chair while the old Marine worked the damaged security card through a cheap reader no one trusted. "Don't breathe on me," Art muttered. "I'm 6 feet behind you." "I can feel judgment from there." Maria leaned against a filing cabinet with her arms crossed, still wearing her duty jacket, her radio clipped high on her shoulder. Lena sat near the door with Milo wrapped in a blanket at her feet. The little dog had been too anxious to remain at the shelter once Caleb left with the camera. Elena had argued against bringing him, then watched him refuse water, food, and rest until Ranger returned. After that, she had said only, "Fine, but if he crashes, I blame all of you." Ranger lay between Milo and the door. The German shepherd did not sleep. His amber eyes followed every movement in the room, but his body stayed loose enough to keep Milo from panicking. Every few minutes Milo lifted his head, found Ranger still there, and lowered himself again. On the laptop, the first file opened as a band of gray static. Art cursed softly. Then shapes appeared. The angle was high, tilted, and damaged by water distortion. The kennel yard, seen at night. Rain already slanting sideways. A floodlight flickering near the storage building. Maria stepped forward. The timestamp showed the hour before the worst of the storm reached Grayharbor. At first, nothing moved except rain. And then a truck backed into frame. Not a rescue truck, not animal transport. A Harbor Valor box truck with the Foundation's logo printed on the side. The soldier's hand resting on a dog's head, clean and noble even through the static. 2 men moved quickly from the storage building to the truck. They carried framed display boards wrapped in plastic, then long document boxes, then a glass case packed in foam. Art's hand went still on the mouse. "That case," he said. Caleb did not need him to finish. The glass case was the right size for the bronze star. The footage jumped. The image broke into blocks of color, returned, then caught a kennel row in the background. Gates still closed, shadows moving inside some of them. Lena rose from her chair. "Pause it." Art paused. The image blurred, but there was no mistaking it. Behind the men loading the truck, at least 3 kennel doors remained shut. Something moved behind the wire, not clearly enough for court, maybe, clearly enough for conscience. Lena's voice lost its steadiness. "They loaded the displays first." Maria said nothing. On screen, a man in a dark coat crossed through the rain. His face was turned away, but the posture was familiar. Straight, composed, untouched by hurry, even in disaster. Elias Crow. He held a clipboard beneath his coat while another man struggled with a crate. The footage skipped again. When it returned, a banner was being folded into the truck. "No hero forgotten." Art looked as if someone had spit on a flag. Caleb felt anger rise in him, clean and dangerous. Not the hot flash that made men stupid, something colder. He had seen cowardice before. He had seen men leave others behind and invent reasons afterward. The reasons always sounded better indoors. Storm conditions, limited personnel, confusion, unavoidable loss. On the laptop, Elias turned toward the kennel row. For 1 second the camera caught his profile. He looked at the closed gates, then back at the truck. He did not move toward the dogs. He moved toward the display case. Milo made a tiny sound from the blanket, not a bark. A memory. Ranger lifted his head and touched his nose once to Milo's shoulder. The small dog stopped shaking, but his eyes stayed fixed on the ghostly movement inside the screen. as though part of him understood the room had found the night he had been trying not to remember. Art clicked to the next fragment. This one was worse because it was quieter. No wind audio survived, only digital crackle. A man carried a box labeled Bellamy Archive. Another carried a folded tripod and lighting equipment. A third dragged a plastic bin marked Donor Materials. Behind them, rainwater ran along the kennel floor. Lena whispered, "Where are the carriers?" No one answered. She looked at Maria. If they were evacuating animals, there would be carriers, leashes, medical bags, at least food containers. Maria's jaw worked once. Unless they moved the animals earlier. Lena looked back at the closed gates on the frozen frame. Maria did not defend the sentence. She had only said what a report would require. Caleb took the evidence pouch from his jacket. He unfolded the gauze enough for the bronze star to catch the desk lamp. Its darkened surface looked almost black now, the star shape stubborn beneath salt scars and age. "He used it," Caleb said. Art did not look away from the screen. Crow built rooms around it. The old Marine reached for a folder from his desk and pulled out a faded newspaper clipping protected in a plastic sleeve. It showed a community hall from years earlier. Folding tables, a donation banner, Elias Crow younger but already polished, and in the center, under a small spotlight, a glass case holding the bronze star. Beside it stood a photograph of Thomas Bellamy. Thomas was an old man in the picture, thin, plain-faced, wearing a work jacket instead of a uniform. He looked uncomfortable being seen, the kind of man a camera had to catch before he escaped. The caption read, "Local Hero's Legacy helps retired service dogs find peace." Art tapped the clipping with one blunt finger. "I was there," he said. Crow talked about Thomas like they were brothers in arms, made half the room cry, said every dollar would go to food, medicine, warm beds. His voice roughened. I gave him $200 and thanked him. No one said that was not his fault. Art would not have believed them. The front door of the VFW opened hard enough to shake the framed photographs on the wall. Ranger stood before the footsteps, reached the hallway. Elias Crow entered with a man in a charcoal suit and two Harbor Valor staffers wearing branded jackets. Elias looked around the room with mild disappointment, as though he had expected better manners from a building full of old flags. The suited man carried a leather portfolio. He was perhaps 45, narrow-faced, smooth-haired, with the dry calm of someone paid to turn guilt into paperwork. "Deputy Holt," Elias said, "this has gone far enough." Maria stepped away from the cabinet. "You're in a restricted evidence review." "No," the suited man said gently. "You are in a private veterans club reviewing property belonging to Harbor Valor Foundation without authorization." Art stood up slowly. "This is my club. You can authorize yourself back into the parking lot." Elias ignored him. His eyes moved to the laptop, then the medal in Caleb's hand, then Milo on the blanket. Milo shrank. Ranger took one step forward. That single step changed the room. The Harbor Valor staffers stopped near the doorway. The suited man's calm thinned around the mouth. Elias raised both hands slightly. "No one is here to upset the animal." "Then you're failing quietly," Lena said. The suited man opened his portfolio. "My name is Julian Price. I represent Harbor Valor Foundation. We have filed notice regarding the unlawful retention of Foundation property, including one animal, one military decoration, and archival materials removed from Foundation premises." Maria's face remained still, but Caleb saw the pressure land. Rank, law, complaint, career. Julian Price did not need to raise his voice. He had brought a stack of consequences and placed them neatly on the table. Elias turned to Caleb with a softer expression. "You're a veteran," he said. "You know how quickly good work can be destroyed by misunderstanding. Help us resolve this with dignity. Harbor Valor would be honored to recognize your rescue work publicly. A man like you deserves to be seen." Caleb almost laughed. A man like you. He had heard versions of it before. Men in clean rooms telling men with blood on their boots how honors should be arranged for public viewing. Men offering plaques when what they wanted was silence. He looked at Elias, and for a moment the room fell away. He saw another place, another table, another official voice explaining why a mistake would be called a complication, why grief should be patient, why truth had to wait until it was useful. His hand tightened around the metal. Rage asked him for the room. Ranger turned his head and looked at him. Not command, not warning. Anchor. Caleb breathed once. Then he set the bronze star on the table, gently, in plain view. No, he said. Elias's eyes narrowed slightly. No? No to the photograph. No to the handshake. No to being used as a clean face for a dirty room. Julian Price shifted. Mr. Ward, I would advise, I'm not your client. Ranger's nose lifted. He turned not toward Elias this time, but toward one of the Harbor Valor staffers near the door. The man held a cardboard relief box against his hip. Blankets lay folded on top, gray and ordinary. Ranger's ears sharpened. Caleb saw it. Maria, he said. She followed his eyes. The staffer stepped back. It's just supplies. Ranger moved closer, controlled and silent. The man looked at Elias, too quickly. Maria crossed the room. Set it down. Julian Price started. Deputy, this is harassment. Set it down. The staffer obeyed, and Maria lifted the blankets. Underneath lay several sealed envelopes, a small wooden nameplate, 2 old photographs, a leather-bound notebook, and the empty velvet insert from a display case. One envelope bore the handwritten words, Thomas Bellamy, Final Instructions. Art made a sound like breath leaving an old wound. Elias's face changed, not completely. He was too practiced for that. But the gentleness vanished. Something cold stood behind his eyes now, something without flags or speeches. Maria looked at the box, then at Elias. I am seizing these materials as potential evidence in a fraud and animal neglect investigation. Julian Price spoke sharply now. You do not have authority. I have an active disaster site, possible animal cruelty, contested ownership, and evidence being removed under blankets from a community shelter. Maria's voice was low, almost calm. I have enough to start. Elias leaned toward her. Careful, Deputy. Grayharbor is a small place. Careers end quickly here when people mistake noise for duty. For the first time, Maria smiled. It was not warm. So do cover-ups. Caleb opened the envelope only after Maria photographed it in place. The paper inside was a copy, water-stained at one edge but readable. Thomas Bellamy's handwriting was thin and slanted, the hand of an old man whose body had begun to betray him but whose intention had not. Caleb read the line once, then again. What I leave behind must shelter those who served and those who cannot speak for themselves. No one in the room moved. Outside, the generator coughed and kept running. The walls of the VFW held their old photographs, old names, old ghosts. Milo pressed closer to Ranger's side. Art lowered himself back into his chair as if his knees had finally remembered his age. Caleb looked at the medal on the table. For the first time, he did not see it as proof of what Thomas Bellamy had done in war. He saw it as the weight of a promise made after war, when no one was watching, when heroism had become quieter and harder to photograph. Elias Crow had not stolen a medal. That would have been simple. He had sold a promise by the pound, dressed it in banners, and left the voiceless outside when the weather turned. Caleb folded the paper carefully and handed it back to Maria. Now we know what he left behind, he said. Maria sealed the envelope. Across the room, Elias said nothing. For once, the silence did not belong to him. By evening, the VFW had become less a veterans' hall than a war room built out of bad lighting, old grief, and stubborn people. The storm had left Grayharbor wounded in practical ways first. Roofs peeled open, roads flooded and refroze, boats leaned against pilings like tired animals. Yet inside Art Keene's back room, the deeper damage had begun showing itself in paper. Names, dates, transfer codes, medical notes that looked official until someone cared enough to read them twice. Milo slept under a table near Ranger, wrapped in a towel Lena had warmed beside the space heater. The small dog's breathing had steadied, though every loud voice still made one torn ear twitch. Ranger lay with his body angled toward the door, not tense, not relaxed. He had placed himself exactly where he could see everyone who entered. Caleb noticed that, and said nothing. Some soldiers slept facing exits. Some dogs did too. Lena sat at the long table with her laptop open, Milo's ear tattoo copied onto a yellow notepad beside her. Her hair had loosened from its tie, and a streak of dried mud crossed one cheek, but her hands moved with surgical precision across the keyboard. Maria stood beside her, reading from the records Harbor Valor had been forced to leave behind after she sealed the box. Mara Whitcomb had spread her own folders across Art's old poker table. Art stood at the coffee machine, not drinking, just holding a chipped mug as if it were the last civil object in the room. "There," Lena said. Everyone looked over. On her screen was a spreadsheet bearing Harbor Valor's logo. Caleb leaned closer. The tattoo number in Milo's ear matched an entry, HV-K9-217. Name listed, Marlowe. Breed, mixed small breed. Status, transferred out. Private foster placement. Date, 9 months earlier. Caleb looked down at Milo under the table. The little dog slept in a shivering curl, ribs faint beneath the blanket. 9 months, Maria said quietly. Lena's voice had gone flat. He was not transferred 9 months ago. He has kennel calluses, collar trauma, chronic stress behavior. He was confined recently. Could the record be wrong? Maria asked. Mara gave a dry laugh without humor. Records are rarely wrong by accident in the exact direction that benefits the person keeping them. Art set the mug down harder than necessary. Caleb kept reading. Other names followed under Milo's entry. Bruno, deceased after medical review. Sailor, transferred to foster. Junebug, transferred to partner facility. Atlas, deceased after medical review. Some had incomplete dates. Some had no destination address. Some had initials where signatures should have been. Lena scrolled slowly, then stopped. Her face changed, not anger first, recognition. She clicked one file open. A scanned medical clearance appeared on the screen. It bore Harbor Valor's header, a block of professional text, and at the bottom, a signature written in blue ink. Dr. Lena Voss, D.V.M. The room became very still. Maria looked from the signature to Lena. "Is that yours?" Lena did not answer immediately. She bent closer, studying the slant, the pressure, the little loop in the V. "It is trying to be." "That's not what I asked." "No," Lena said, "it is not mine." Her voice did not rise. That made it worse. She opened another file, another signature, another dog, another clearance. Then a third, a fourth, a fifth. Caleb watched Lena's jaw tighten with each one. She was not only angry because dogs had been harmed, she was angry in this particular way of a person realizing her name had been used as a tool. "These clearances say I examined animals I never saw," she said. "Some marked terminal, some marked unfit for placement, some marked transferred after care." Maria wrote quickly, "Can you prove the signatures are forged?" "Yes." Lena's eyes stayed on the screen. "But proving it means putting my license, my clinic records, my staff logs, everything into this mess. Elias knows that. He knows most people get quiet when their own name turns up in dirty paper." No one spoke. Then Milo lifted his head under the table and gave one small, uncertain sound. Lena looked down. The little dog's good eye found her. Something in Lena's face softened, but only for a second. Then it settled into a colder kind of resolve. "Well," she said, closing the file, "he misjudged my tolerance for being used." Art made a low, approving noise. "There's the doctor." Mara slid one of her folders toward Maria. "This is why I made copies." The folder held land use requests from 6 years earlier. Harbor Valor had asked the town for expanded access to the rear lot near the old radar station. Their reason was written in polished language: rehabilitation space, outdoor exercise runs, storage for medical supplies, training equipment for retired working dogs. Mara tapped a line with one thin finger. They got the land. Then they built no exercise runs, no proper medical storage. What appeared instead were a media office, a donor event staging room, and a climate-controlled archive for display materials. Art's mouth twisted. Warm boxes for metals, cold concrete for dogs. Mara did not look pleased to be right, as she looked tired of having been right alone. "I submitted a concern," she said, "twice. Once before I retired, once after. The first vanished during a server migration. The second was politely acknowledged by a deputy administrator who now sits on Harbor Valor's advisory board." Maria closed her eyes briefly. Caleb knew the look. A person standing in front of a locked door and realizing the lock had been built into the whole wall. By nightfall, Elias began his answer. It did not come through the front door this time. It came through phones. A local reporter called Maria asking whether she had exceeded authority during storm recovery. A post appeared on Harbor Valor's page thanking rescue workers but warning against emotionally driven misinformation. Someone leaked that Caleb, a former Special Operations veteran, had taken possession of a military decoration without permission. Another post suggested Lena had a personal history of conflict with Harbor Valor's veterinary network. Art found out when an old friend called to ask if he had gone senile chasing ghosts again. He hung up without saying goodbye. Mara received no calls. That seemed to hurt her more. "People stopped calling me years ago," she said, straightening a stack of papers that did not need straightening. "That is how they make a woman invisible, not by proving her wrong, but by waiting until she is old enough to become inconvenient." Caleb stood near the window, watching sleet begin to tap against the glass. Elias was doing exactly what men like him did best. He was not trying to destroy the truth, not yet. He was muddying the path to it, making every witness look biased, every document look complicated, every act of protection look like overreach. Caleb could feel the old anger returning. He had learned in war that confusion was a weapon. Smoke, noise, conflicting reports, all of it could make good people hesitate long enough for bad decisions to become history. Ranger suddenly rose. No bark, only the quiet, complete change of a working dog who had located a problem. Caleb turned. The door between the hall and the storage area was slightly open. It had been closed a moment before. "Maria," Caleb said. She followed his eyes and reached for her sidearm, not drawing it, only becoming ready. Ranger moved first, smooth and silent. The storage area beyond the hall was filled with folded blankets, donated coats, cases of water, and cardboard boxes labeled by size. The lights flickered overhead. At the far end, near the loading door, a man in a Harbor Valor volunteer jacket crouched beside a stack of towels. Milo was pressed behind a plastic bin, shaking so badly the bin trembled. The man held a piece of meat in one hand. His other hand was near Milo's old collar. Ranger stood between them. The German shepherd did not lunge. He did not need to. His body filled the narrow space, head low, eyes fixed on the man's hand. The volunteer looked up with a frightened smile. He was middle-aged, soft around the jaw, with wet hair stuck to his forehead and a badge reading Nolan. "Harbor Valor Relief Team." "I was just helping," he said quickly. "He got loose. I thought I'd bring him back." Caleb stepped into the room. Milo tried to crawl toward him but froze halfway, caught between wanting safety and fearing movement. Lena pushed past Caleb and knelt near the little dog. Her voice, when she spoke, could have cut rope. "That dog is under medical hold." Nolan lifted both hands. "I didn't know." Maria took the piece of meat from the floor with a gloved hand and smelled it. Her face hardened. "What is it?" Caleb asked. "Sedative paste," Lena said before Maria answered. "Common enough. Hidden in food if someone wants an animal quiet." Nolan's smile collapsed. "They told me it would calm him down. That's all. I swear." "Who told you?" Maria asked. Nolan looked toward the loading door. No one stood there now, only tire tracks darkening the slush outside. Maria moved to the door and looked out. "Vehicle just left." Caleb crouched and opened his arms without reaching. "Milo." The small dog stared at him. Ranger turned his head slightly, as if giving Milo permission. Then Milo broke. He crawled the last few feet into Caleb's hands and pressed his muddy face against Caleb's sleeve with a force too desperate for his size. Caleb closed one arm around him. Not tightly. Never tightly. But enough. In the silence that followed, Art stepped into the storage room. His face looked older than it had that morning. "They came for the dog," he said. Caleb looked at Milo's tattooed ear, the trembling body, the old collar mark, the living proof no spreadsheet could fully erase. "No," Caleb said. "They came for a witness." After Maria detained Nolan for questioning and Lena checked Milo for exposure to the sedative, Ranger remained restless. He paced once around the storage room, nose low, then stopped at one of the sealed evidence boxes from Harbor Valor. Maria frowned. That box was already checked. "Not by him," Caleb said. Ranger nosed through the folded cloths and old straps until Caleb lifted out a brittle leather collar hardened by salt and age. A small metal tag hung from it, scratched but readable beneath grime. Bruno. Caleb remembered the bowl in the empty kennel. Maria searched the spreadsheet. Bruno's line appeared near Milo's old number. Status: deceased after medical review. No veterinary invoice, no cremation record, no burial site, no transfer confirmation. Only a name on a bowl, a collar in a box, and a missing dog reduced to a line no one had been meant to question. Art sank into a chair as if the air had gone out of his bones. Mara put one hand over her mouth. Lena looked at the collar, then at the forged files on her laptop. Caleb felt the room tilt into a darker understanding. Milo had not been the exception. He had been the one who got out. And somewhere beneath Harbor Valor's clean language, there were more names missing from the list. The city had sent machinery before it sent answers. By mid-afternoon, 2 yellow loaders waited beyond the Harbor Valor gate, their buckets lifted like blunt jaws. A flatbed truck idled behind them, stacked with orange barriers and temporary fencing. The storm had damaged half of Grayharbor's waterfront, and the town needed ground for a larger relief station before the next freeze hardened everything into place. To the city crew, the old kennel was debris. To Caleb Ward, it was not empty enough to be destroyed. The sky had brightened after the rain, but the light no longer felt clean. It exposed everything without mercy. The claw marks on the kennel door, the bowls with names etched into metal, the bleach stains dried in pale rivers along the concrete drains. The half-frozen water beyond the fence shifted black between broken plates of ice. And Maria stood between the loaders and the gate, one hand on her radio, her face set in a way that invited no friendly conversation. "You've got 2 hours," the site supervisor told her. He was a broad man in an orange jacket, exhausted and red-eyed from storm duty. "After that, we have orders to clear unsafe structures." Maria showed him her badge. "Then enjoy your 2-hour break." He looked as though he wanted to argue, then looked at Ranger, who stood beside Caleb with silent, amber-eyed attention. The man decided the break was acceptable. Lena had not wanted Milo brought back here. She had said it 3 times at the VFW, once in medical terms, once in plain English, and once using language art described as doctor poetry with knives in it. But Milo had become agitated when Caleb and Ranger prepared to leave. He paced, refused water, and pressed himself against the door as if some part of him knew the place they were going was where his fear had been born. So Lena compromised. Milo came wrapped in a thick blanket inside a padded rescue crate carried only as far as the kennel yard. He would not be used like evidence, Lena said. He would not be forced into any room. He would only be allowed to react if he chose. Ranger seemed to understand. The German shepherd moved ahead from the rear kennel row, nose low, following a scent that had survived bleach, rain, salt, and time. Caleb kept the leash loose. Ranger did not need pulling. He had the grim patience of a worker following a thread through a ruin. The trail led beyond the bent drain where Milo had escaped, past the rear fence, and toward the old radar station. The building stood on a low concrete rise near the black water, a squat relic from another era. Its dish had been removed long ago, leaving a rusted circular frame pointed uselessly at the sky. Ice glazed the steps. Storm surge had pushed seaweed and broken planks against the foundation. Mara Whitcomb stopped at the base of the rise, clutching her folder beneath her coat. This section was never part of the approved kennel expansion. Art looked at her. "You sure? I filed the boundaries. You remember every line you ever filed?" Mara gave him a thin look over her glasses. "Some people collect coins. I remember where men hide loopholes." Lena carried the evidence kit. Maria carried a flashlight and her radio. Art carried a pry bar and, despite everyone's objections, the stubborn belief that age excused him from being told to stay back. Ranger did not go to the main door, and he turned instead toward the seaward side of the radar station, where a narrow concrete ledge ran between the building and the slope down to the water. Thin ice had formed over puddles along the ledge. Beneath it, dark water seeped and breathed. Caleb stopped. The ledge was barely wide enough for one person. Beyond it, the ground fell toward the half-frozen sound. If the concrete crumbled or his boot slipped, the water below would take his strength in seconds. Maria saw his calculation. "No. Ranger says it's there. Ranger does not fill out next of kin paperwork." Caleb looked at the ledge, then at the old steel ring set into the concrete near the corner. "Tie me off." Lena cursed under her breath. Art held out a coil of rope before Caleb even asked. "You fall in. I'm not jumping after you." Caleb clipped the rope to his vest. "I'd be disappointed if you did." "Good. Die with realistic expectations." The humor was thin, but it kept fear from taking too much room. Caleb stepped onto the ledge. The wind came hard from the water, needling through his old olive-gray combat shirt and the rescue vest over it. His boots found patches of rough concrete beneath the ice. Ranger waited at the corner, body tense, eyes locked on Caleb, but paws planted where Caleb had ordered him to stay. Step by step, Caleb edged along the wall. Below, the black water opened and closed between white plates. It made a soft knocking sound against the concrete, almost polite, as if asking to be let in. At the far end of the ledge, half hidden behind storm-thrown driftwood, Caleb found a sheet of metal bolted over a low service hatch, not rusted shut, recently secured. He wiped slush from the bolts. The heads were bright where a tool had turned them. "Maria!" he called. This has been opened." Maria's face changed at once. They worked the panel loose with the pry bar. It came away with a wet groan, revealing a narrow passage beneath the radar station. Cold air breathed out of it, not fresh air, stored air, air that had been holding its tongue. Ranger stood before the opening and did not enter. That told Caleb more than a bark would have. They went in one at a time. The room beneath the station was low, damp, and unfinished, its ceiling crossed with pipes and old cable brackets. Their flashlights moved over concrete walls darkened by moisture. Water had reached the first few feet of the floor, leaving a brown line and bits of floating paper stuck in corners. It was not a hidden treasure room. That would have been easier to bear. It was a room for things someone had not wanted to explain. Plastic bins lined one wall. Some had cracked lids. Plastic bins lined one wall. Some had cracked lids. Some were labeled in black marker. Medical, transfer, memorial, deceased. On a sagging metal shelf lay old collars hardened by salt, tags corroded at the edges, folded blankets, leashes, and laminated photographs once used in donation displays. A basset hound beside an elderly veteran. A gray-muzzled shepherd wearing a service harness. A black lab with one cloudy eye resting its head on a man's knee. Smiling photographs, silent tags. Mara pressed a hand to the wall to steady herself. Art removed his cap again. Lena opened the bin marked Medical and went still. "These are originals," she said. Maria moved beside her. The forms inside were swollen from damp, but readable in places. Some were real medical intake sheets. Some had missing pages. Some had sticky notes with instructions written in a handwriting none of them recognized. Backdate. Moved to inactive. No public listing. Lena opened another folder and found one of the forged forms bearing her signature. Behind it, tucked carelessly, was the real intake record for the same dog. Different condition. Different date. No terminal diagnosis. Lena's face went pale with anger. This dog was treatable. No one asked which dog. There were too many names now. From the entrance came a sound so small Caleb almost missed it. Milo. Lena turned sharply. "He stays outside." But Milo had not come in. He stood at the threshold of the passage, blanket slipping from his narrow shoulders, trembling but refusing to back away. Ranger stood between him and the room, broad body blocking most of the opening. The German Shepherd did not push Milo back. He simply held the line, giving the small dog the choice denied to him before. Milo stared into the room. His swollen eye had opened a little more over the past day. The good eye fixed on the far corner where a faded blanket lay beneath a low shelf. The little dog made no sound, but his body remembered. Caleb felt the moment move through everyone, not proof in the legal sense, not a document, not a signature, but a living creature standing before the place that had broken him and choosing, with every trembling muscle, not to enter. Lena crossed to him and knelt. "You don't have to go back in there," she said. Milo leaned against her hand. Ranger stayed at the threshold until Milo turned away. Only then did the German Shepherd look back at Caleb, as if the room could now be searched. Mara found the will in the third bin. It was not hidden well. That almost made it more insulting. A full copy of Thomas Bellamy's final instructions lay inside a folder marked Archive, Non-Display. The pages had been placed in a plastic sleeve, better protected than many of the medical records. Mara read silently at first. Then her mouth tightened. "What is it?" Maria asked. Mara's voice was quiet but precise. They quoted him selectively. Art stepped closer. Mara held up the page. Thomas Bellamy did not give Harbor Valor permission to use his name without conditions. He required annual accounting, independent veterinary review, public reporting of placements, and priority care for retired working dogs and abandoned animals after disasters. She turned the page. He also wrote that no military decoration or personal archive could be used for fundraising unless the animal care accounts were open to community inspection. Art's face darkened. "So Crow cut the locks off the promise," he said, "and kept the pretty door." Maria photographed each page before touching it. "This changes the case." Lena looked around the room. "This proves they knew the terms." Caleb thought of the bronze star under glass, the spotlight, the donation envelopes, Elias speaking softly to rooms full of decent people who wanted their gratitude to become something useful. A promise could be stolen quietly. That was the wicked elegance of it. Not every theft required a broken window. Some required a microphone, a sad story, and a room of people too kind to doubt. Footsteps sounded above them, then voices. Maria lifted her radio. "Hold position." A shape appeared at the passage entrance. Elias Crow stood in the gray daylight beyond the hatch, his dark coat buttoned against the wind, his polished boots carefully avoiding the worst of the slush. He looked down into the room as if disappointed to find guests in a private cellar. Behind him waited Julian Price and one Harbor Valor staffer, both silent. "Deputy Holt," Elias called. "This area is unsafe. You are interfering with disaster clearance." Maria climbed out first, holding the sealed evidence bag against her side. Caleb followed, then Lena, Mara, and Art. Ranger came last, pausing beside Milo before stepping into the open air. The wind struck harder outside. Elias looked at the evidence bags. "You don't understand what you're damaging." Caleb wiped damp concrete from his hands. "Then explain it." Something in Elias shifted. Perhaps he was tired. Perhaps he knew the room below had done what arguments could not. The smoothness remained, but the warmth was gone. "Organizations require symbols," Elias said. "People don't donate to spreadsheets. They donate to stories. Thomas Bellamy's metal kept doors open. It fed animals. It kept programs alive." Lena's voice cut in. "Which animals?" Elias ignored her. Art took a step forward. "You used his name. I preserved it. You sold it. For a purpose." Mara, small and rigid in the cold, held up the photographed will. "Not his purpose." Elias looked at her then, really looked, and Caleb saw contempt flash through the calm. Not anger at being accused by equals, irritation at being challenged by someone he had already filed away as irrelevant. That broke something in Maria. She raised her radio. "This is Deputy Holt at Harbor Valor Kennel Site. I need state investigative support, animal control enforcement, and financial crimes notified. We have recovered original records, contested estate documents, and evidence of possible animal neglect connected to disaster evacuation." Julian Price moved quickly. "Deputy." Maria kept speaking over him, voice steady. Elias stared at her. "You're making a career decision," he said. Maria lowered the radio only after the dispatcher confirmed. "No," she said. "I'm making a report." For once, Elias had no prepared smile. Art pulled out his phone with stiff fingers. "I'm calling every VFW post from here to Anchorage." Lena zipped the medical records into a dry case. "I'll have clinic logs ready by morning." Mara held her folder against her chest. "And I will give them everything I kept." Her voice caught at the end, not from weakness, from the old shame of having waited. Caleb turned back toward the open hatch. On a shelf just inside the room, half buried beneath mildewed display cloth, he had noticed something before Elias arrived. He climbed down one more step and reached for it. A glass display case, cracked at one corner, empty. Its velvet lining bore the pressed outline of a star. Caleb carried it into the daylight. The wind moved over the empty case, over the kennel, over the black water that had not frozen shut. The bronze star was not there. It had left that room tangled in the fur of a dog no one had meant to save. Caleb looked at Milo, small beneath Lena's blanket, standing beside Ranger in the cold. And people like to say men rescued animals. Sometimes that was true. But this time, a discarded dog had dragged the last honest piece of a dead man's promise out of the dark, and all the clean coats in Grayharbor could no longer put it back. Grayharbor did not heal in a single morning. The town still smelled of wet timber, diesel, and salt pushed too far inland. Plywood covered broken windows along the ferry road. A fishing boat still leaned against the cannery wall where the storm had thrown it like a toy from a cruel child's hand. Beyond the harbor, the Sound remained half-frozen, its black water showing between pale plates of ice that shifted and knocked softly together. But something in the town had changed, not loudly. Grayharbor was not a place that trusted loud things. The change came in smaller ways. A city worker who had once avoided Mara Whitcomb's calls now carried boxes of Harbor Valor records into the VFW without meeting her eyes. A fisherman who had donated to Elias Crow's gala left a bag of dog food outside the old kennel gate. Someone scraped Harbor Valor's slogan from the front fence, letter by letter, until "No Hero Forgotten" became only a row of pale scars on weathered wood. Harbor Valor Foundation was suspended pending investigation. Its bank accounts were frozen. Its records, the ones not already damaged by water or intention, had been seized. State investigators came and went with sealed cases. Animal control officials took photographs of every kennel, every drain, every bowl, every collar. Elias Crow did not shout when they took his statement. Caleb had expected that much. Men like Elias did not give the world the satisfaction of seeing them break. He stood near his black SUV in the same long dark coat, hair combed back, gloves spotless, speaking with Julian Price under the dull sky. Even then, Elias looked less defeated than inconvenienced, as if truth itself were a scheduling problem that could be appealed. When he finally passed Caleb, he paused. "You think this fixes anything?" Elias asked. Caleb stood with Ranger beside him. The German shepherd's yellow-black coat moved in the wind, his amber eyes steady on Elias's hands. "No," Caleb said, "but it stops you from calling it charity." For once, Elias did not answer. He looked toward the old kennel, toward the VFW, toward the people who had stopped believing his voice. Then he stepped into the SUV, shut the door softly, and drove away without haste. That was the end of his control over the story. Not the end of the investigation, not the end of the damage, but the end of him deciding what Grayharbor was allowed to remember. The Bronze Star was brought back to the VFW 2 days later. Maria carried it in a sealed evidence sleeve first, then placed it in Art Keene's hands after the investigators allowed a temporary community display. Art held the medal as if it might still be warm from the palm of the man who had earned it. The old Marine had shaved that morning, badly but sincerely. He wore his brown canvas jacket and blue-gray flannel, and for once he had nothing sarcastic to say. Mara placed Thomas Bellamy's copied instruction beside the medal in a plain wooden case. Not the old glass display with velvet and theatrical light. This case had been made by a retired ferry carpenter from scrap cedar, sanded smooth, left unfinished except for a clear coat. No spotlight, no donation jar, no banner, only the darkened bronze star, the name Thomas Bellamy, and one line from his will written beneath it, "Shelter what the world forgets." The VFW fell quiet around those words. Caleb stood near the back wall. He did not like ceremonies. Even small ones made him feel the old pressure of being watched, as if people wanted sorrow to stand straight and make a good photograph. Ranger sat by his leg, calm and dignified, while Milo remained wrapped in a blanket on Lena's lap near the side table. Milo's torn ear had begun to heal crooked. His swollen eye had opened more. He still startled at sudden footsteps, still tucked his body low when a stranger reached too fast. But when Art's voice rasped across the room, Milo lifted his head. Art looked at the little dog and cleared his throat. "I don't do speeches," he said. Mara murmured, "That has never stopped you before." A few people laughed softly. Even Art, against his will, almost smiled. He pointed toward the medal. Thomas Bellamy didn't leave that star behind so men in clean coats could sell themselves with it. He left a duty. We missed that. Some of us clapped when we should have asked questions. His voice roughened. I clapped. No one rushed to comfort him. That was good. Some guilt did not want hands on it yet. Art looked at Milo again. That dog brought it back, not because he knew what it was, because he survived what we failed to see. Lena lowered her eyes to Milo, one hand resting lightly on his thin back. Caleb watched the room absorb the sentence. There was no thunder in it, no grand twist, only a plain truth, and sometimes plain truth entered people more deeply than drama. After that, work began, not symbolic work, real work. The old kennel could not be used as it was, so the town reclaimed the safer front building and sealed off the damaged rear until investigators finished. The new shelter would not inherit Harbor Valor's name. Mara insisted on that. Art agreed. Maria made sure every document said it clearly. Bellamy House. No slogan, no polished logo, no heroic silhouette placed on a donation poster. Just a name, a roof, a ledger anyone could read. Lena set the first rules with a marker on a whiteboard. Veterinary review by an outside clinic, public placement records, emergency evacuation plan, no animal accepted without traceable care notes, no fundraising display without open accounts. Mara stood beside her, correcting wording with the severity of a woman editing law into mercy. Maria handled the chain of custody, phone calls and town permissions. She looked more tired than victorious. Caleb thought that made sense. Doing the right thing rarely left a person shining. Mostly it left them with paperwork, enemies, and the uneasy peace of having chosen anyway. Art did the jobs that required tools and complaining. He fixed a warped interior door, replaced 2 broken latches, sanded the edge of a wooden sleeping platform until it could not splinter a paw. Every time someone thanked him, he told them to thank someone with better knees. Milo watched him from a blanket near the heater. At first, Art ignored the dog with great theatrical effort. Then Milo sneezed. Art glanced over. Milo sneezed again, smaller this time, as if apologizing for the first. Art pointed a screwdriver at him. "Don't start." Milo wagged the last inch of his tail. That was all. 1 inch. It undid the old Marine completely. By evening, after the others had gone to check on the rescued animals housed temporarily around town, Art set a thick folded blanket beside his chair in the VFW office. He placed a bowl of clean water near it, then looked around as if daring anyone to accuse him of tenderness. Caleb stood in the doorway with Ranger. "You adopting him?" Caleb asked. Art grunted. "Temporarily supervising a nuisance." "For how long?" "Until he stops being a nuisance." Milo limped across the office, sniffed the blanket, turned in 3 careful circles, and lowered himself onto it, with a sigh so deep the room seemed to exhale with him. Art looked away. Too late. Everyone had seen. Ranger walked in, sniffed Milo once, then lay across the threshold like a guard at the gate of a very small kingdom. That was the moment Caleb felt the story turn from exposure into repair. Not forgiveness. Not yet. Repair. There was a difference. Forgiveness could be demanded too easily by people who wanted consequences skipped. Repair had dirt under its fingernails. Repair got up early, counted medicine, fixed doors, checked records, and made sure the weakest body in the room had a warm place to sleep. The next morning, the sky brightened again after a thin fall of rain. Caleb stood at the doorway of Bellamy House while adults moved quietly behind him. Lena checked a supply shelf. Mara labeled a filing cabinet with careful block letters. Maria spoke on the phone with investigators. Art pretended not to hover near Milo, who had discovered that the old man's boots made a useful pillow. Ranger stood beside Caleb, broad and steady, his ears lifted toward the sound. Outside, Grayharbor's water still had not frozen shut. Black channels moved between the white ice plates, reminders that the world did not close its wounds just because people wanted an ending. Inside, a rescued dog slept. A German shepherd kept watch. A medal rested behind simple glass. Caleb looked at the bronze star and thought of all the words men had tried to own. Honor, service, sacrifice, legacy. They had sounded different in Elias Crow's mouth. They sounded different here too, but for another reason. Here, no one was using them. They were being practiced. Caleb had once believed honor belonged to battlefields, uniforms, folded flags, and names spoken over polished wood. Over polished wood. He had seen enough of that to distrust the shine. But Grayharbor, broken and cold and stubborn, had taught him the older meaning. Honor was a door opened during bad weather. Honor was a record kept honestly when no one applauded. Honor was a German shepherd refusing to ignore fear. Honor was a little dog surviving long enough to drag a dead man's promise back into the light. The rain stopped. A thin brightness touched the roof, the wet road, the unfinished ice. The plain wooden case where Thomas Bellamy's medal lay no longer as bait, but as witness. Caleb rested one hand on Ranger's head. Behind him, Milo sighed in his sleep. And for the first time since the storm, the sound of water beyond Grayharbor did not feel like a warning. It felt like something still moving, something not yet frozen, something that might, with enough care, become clean again. In the end, this story reminds us that God often works through the smallest and most wounded lives. A forgotten medal, a frightened stray dog, and a loyal German shepherd became the path back to truth. What men tried to bury in silence, God allowed to rise through the storm. Not with thunder, not with glory, but through a trembling little dog who simply survived long enough to carry the truth into the light. In our daily lives, we may pass by people, animals, and quiet moments that seem small or unimportant. But sometimes the thing we almost overlook is the very thing God uses to teach us compassion, courage, and responsibility. Honor is not only found in medals, titles, or public praise. Honor is found in the door we open for the helpless, the truth we protect when it costs us something, and the kindness we choose when no one is watching. May this story remind you to look closer, love deeper, and never ignore the quiet cries around you, because sometimes a miracle does not arrive as a bright light from heaven. Sometimes it arrives wet, shivering, covered in mud, and waiting for someone with a faithful heart to notice. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who still believes in loyalty, truth, and second chances. Leave a comment below and tell us where you are watching from. Subscribe to the channel so we can continue bringing you more stories of courage, healing, and hope. May God bless you, protect your home, comfort your heart, and guide your steps through every storm.